So when we're outsourcing, we generally have to negotiate with the different partners that we're outsourcing with. So what the chapter wants to help you remember is that project management is not a contest. Try to remember that everyone is on the same side that is working towards the success of the project and not just working towards what is best for each individual group. So we want to make sure that we're working through various things. So when we're looking at negotiating, we want to think if we're pushed, we don't want to push back. We don't want to create those scenarios where we're just creating infighting and conflict. Ask questions instead of making statements. So try to make things look flexible and get around the reason why. If we make statements, sometimes that makes people get their backs up because they think you're making definitive statements and that there are no options or room to negotiate. Use silence as a response to unreasonable demands. So don't even answer to various demands if you're not going to work for them. Ask for advice. Encourage others to criticize your ideas and positions. So be open to communications and hearing negative things. Try to separate, as the textbook says, separate the person from the project. Try to negotiate around the project and specific initiatives without involving things that are quite personal to people. So if you're talking about um, one different thing is just focusing on what the problem is and not the person involved in the problem, focusing on issues and not personalities. Then we can also use Fisher and Urey's best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which is the BATNA, which stands for best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So this is a way that we work through to develop toward a win-win scenario, that there's no deal unless you both agree that you're getting something. So trying to maybe negotiate dates and saying that I'm not going to agree to one date if you don't agree to give me something else. So trying to make it more about people working together to create negotiations instead of working against each other. It's more important for me to get my thing than it is for you to get your thing, which then creates conflict and problems. Another thing that we have to work on is managing our customer relationship. So, as customer satisfaction is one of the main goals of our project. Negative effects of dissatisfied customers on a firm's reputation is greater than the positive effect of satisfied customers. I don't know if you've ever heard that old analogy of a satisfied customer might tell one other person, but a dissatisfied customer is going to tell anyone who will listen about how dissatisfied they are. And then think about even yourself. If you're happy with a product, how likely are you to talk about that all the time or to tell other people? But if you've had a negative experience, you're going to tell people about that any opportunity that you get. The satisfaction is a relationship. It's a relationship of our perceived performance versus what the expected performance was. So, what was I looking for out of this project compared to what I believe I received? So we have to, as project managers, be skilled at managing customer expectations and their perceptions. So what are their expectations for an actual finished project, and can we even meet those expectations? And then as we're communicating with them throughout the project, what are their expectations of what the project looks like at the end, and what are their perceptions of how the project is currently going? So we have this met expectations model of customer satisfaction with that perceived performance versus the expected performance. So if performance falls short of expectations, the customer is dissatisfied. If performance matches expectations, the customer is satisfied. And if we exceed expectations, the customer is satisfied or even delighted. How can we manage those customer expectations? Well, one, we don't want to oversell the project. We don't want to promise things that we can't deliver. We want to make sure we have a well-defined scope statement. So that goes back to when we're writing the project scope and the importance of the project scope statement. We want to communicate with them about the project's progress and how things are going, especially if there are significant issues with the project that need to be addressed. We want to involve them in any decisions and changes. We want to make sure we're communicating with them regularly, that we're working on the scope. We don't want to get into a situation where the customer is coming back and we're getting scope creep. The speaking with one voice. So this is very important. Establishing that the customer needs to speak with the project manager at all times instead of going to members of the project team with various information. And part of the reason for that is because they're going to get conflicting messages from different team members. Different team members are going to be working on different things. Different team members might have different opinions about how the project is going. And conflict and communication issues will generate and ensue if we allow them to communicate with anybody on the team. So try to channel and funnel that communication to be just with one person on the team. And then speak the language of the customer. Don't be overly technical. Don't use a lot of jargon that the customer doesn't understand and might get frustrated about. So we have different project roles, challenges, and strategies. So as a project manager, we are an entrepreneur. So we have our challenges are that we're trying to navigate unfamiliar surroundings. And our strategies for that are to use persuasion to influence others. Project managers are politicians. We have diverse cultures. We have diverse personalities within our organization, within our team, within our area, and we need to be able to help navigate those relationships. We can be a friend. So who do we need to build relationships with in order to sustain our project team and keep our project team on track? Who do we need to create those bridges with our customers and within the organization? We also need to be able to market both ourselves and our projects. And we're a coach. Coaching is part of leadership and management. How do we motivate our team members to work, especially if we're not with them all of the time? If we have a virtual team or a team that is globally located, or we're outsourcing to a wide variety of teams that aren't within our purview, then we need to be able to get all of those teams to work together on challenging tasks and getting that project done. The last thing that this chapter talks about in the appendix is contract management. So this is very similar to the RFP process and how we create contracts with groups that we're outsourcing with and what our procurement management process is. So planning our purchases and acquisitions to make sure that everything is on schedule, determining what to procure, when, and how. We look at the build versus buy analysis in order to look at what contract we want to use, planning the contract. So what are the requirements for the products and services desired from the groups we're outsourcing with? What are the potential suppliers or sellers of this capability. We include our procurement documents such as an RFP as well as our selection criteria. Selecting sellers. So this is obtaining information, quotes, bids, and proposals from various providers. Administering the contract is managing the relationship with the group that we're outsourcing with, and then closing the contract, which is the completion and settlement of our contract. So what is a contract? A contract is a formal agreement between two parties. So we are contracting with a group to help us finish our project. Within the contract, a contract is a legal document. So it defines the responsibilities of the party. Who is responsible for what rights does the party have to each other, and what remedies are available if one of us breaches our obligations. There are two main types of contracts. The first being a fixed price or lump sum agreement. So the contractor with the lowest bid performs all work specified in the contract at a fixed price. Regardless of what that contract's actual costs are, they're going to only get the amount of the bid. So there's a disadvantage that this is more difficult and costly to repair. And the other disadvantage for contractors is the risk of underestimating project costs. So a contractor might be so inclined to get the contract that they give a really low bid. So then the problem with that, if they are awarded the contract, is that that's the price they're going to get regardless of what actual costs are. So they are tempted to underestimate their project costs in order to be awarded the contract. And once they have the contract, they're stuck with those costs. The other main type of contract is a cost plus contract. In a cost plus contract, the contractor is reimbursed for all costs plus an additional fee to cover overhead and profit. The risk to the client is in relying on the contractor's best effort to contain costs. So you have to trust that the group outsourcing with you is going to try to manage costs and not just say, let's cost whatever we can because we're writing it off to this project. Contractors, how we keep contractors in line with this type of cost plus contract is that we'll have performance and schedule incentives. So this might be where we have a bonus for finishing by a specific time. And then we'd also have cost sharing clauses where they're responsible for sharing various types of costs. So contract type versus risk. So for the buyer, the firm fixed price contract is the lowest risk. But for the seller, the person who's making the bid, the cost plus percentage of cost has the lowest risk to them. This all comes down to making estimates on bids, being able to control the costs of those estimates within the day. If we need to make changes to our contract after it's been written, we want to make sure that we have a process by which that can be modified. So this is important before we even sign the contract, that we have some kind of defined process for modifying a contract. So what kind of paperwork might be done, what are our dispute resolution procedures, who needs to approve specific changes, are there different levels depending on what kind of change it is. And like I said, we would want that included, those provisions for change of the contract included in the original contract that everyone signs and agrees to. That is the end of chapter 12.